I don't know why it took 2 elections or 3 elections to really learn this, going back all the way to 2016, but it seems like they've finally started to learn their lesson about what Americans want to hear. I think maybe to a degree, the Democrats still are guilty of maybe too much idealism in the sense the algorithms are bad, social media is unhealthy, so let's stick with like a internet-based, cable-based campaign.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Discourse Debrief. This is episode 9, so close to double digits. I'm Logan.
I'm Peyton.
I'm Abby.
And then we have a special guest with us that we will explain in just a moment. Abby, we have an event coming up. Would you like to explain?
Yes. The UA Discourse Series is having an event December 2nd. It's going to be a debate. Me and Logan are going to be on one side. Peyton may or may not be moderating. It's up for debate. But the question is, are universities meant to expand students' minds or their wallets? Dun,
Yes,
dun, dun.
very excited for that.
So stay tuned on our Instagram for more event information.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's get straight into it. Sean, you're a guest with us. Why don't you just kind of give a brief background of who you are, kind of what you do, etc.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. So I'm Sean Morrow. I'm actually a University of Arizona graduate, class of 2019, and more importantly, a proud member of the University of Arizona Debate Club inaugural class.
Back when it was called Debate Series.
Wow.
Yeah, it's grown an amazing amount since my time, so
Yeah.
I'm really happy to see all the really cool stuff that you guys are doing. So now I work as a policy strategist for an elected council member in city government. I can't say a lot more than that for national security purposes.
For sure.
I'm just kidding. It's, my job's not nearly that important, but I'll say I work in a mostly blue city in a mostly red state. So maybe it's Phoenix. Maybe it's not Phoenix.
Maybe it's not.
Yeah.
I would argue Arizona's purple. And then just kind of before we get into everything, how did you come to be in this position? Like, what does that look like, kind of that career ladder, so to speak?
Yeah, so my arc is maybe slightly unique, only in the sense that I majored in political science here at the School of Government and Public Policy at Arizona, and then went back home to the DC area for international development post-grad program at George Washington University. But then I strayed away, certainly not intentionally, but I strayed away from the policy and political career track. I was in consulting for a while, far too long, frankly. Didn't enjoy that, and got to a point where I was so over it and so desperately in need of a meaningful career and meaningful work. I started volunteering a lot.
Awesome.
I was volunteering during a state legislative session for Habitat for Humanity, advocating for a series of affordable housing bills. And through that network, I was eventually connected to the council member that I work for now for an interview. So
Awesome.
that was kind of my foot in the door.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I think we can all relate to that of, we kind of have our dream career that we aspire to be, but, there's a lot of hoops and ladders that we need to jump through to get to that point. You guys have any questions before we move on?
I guess I'm just curious, like, what was, like, back when it was Debate Club? Like, what did that look like, being, like, an inaugural member?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be more familiar with how it works now, because that would help me with a frame. Well, how many members do you have now?
Right now we have, I think, 7.
We usually have around 10 to 12, though, second semester.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have 7, and then we have roughly an event every month. Could be a debate, could be a panel, could be some kind of guest speaker. And then we have this podcast. 2 of our other members run a podcast, and then Winter, and is it just Winter, or does Claire participate as well?
Claire's in it.
Claire's in as well. They run another podcast about creativity. So we've really kind of transformed more into like a media sort of, I don't know.
Organization.
Yeah, empire.
Empire.
So to speak. But still embracing, I would imagine, the same kind of core ideals of when it began.
Okay, so that's interesting for me to hear, because I only did 2 semesters. My last 2 semesters at Arizona were the first 2 semesters of U of A debate, and it was actually much bigger. Like the first semester of U of A debate was, I think, maybe as many as 30 or 40 people.
Wow.
And it actually shrunk the second semester, but it was still maybe about 20 of us. And it was definitely much less media focused and more focused on actual just debate. And for the first semester, I think it was entirely internal. It was much more just kind of DIY, grassroots kind of style, where it was just people within debate club. We would have teams of 2 and people would debate each other.
Yeah.
No one would really show up. It was just, we would do it. And occasionally Ted and some of the other, I guess, professors who were part of it that year would have some of their students come. But for the most part, it was very internal and not super public facing. Even by my second semester, we started to have more of a social media presence, but I think it was like quite literally just like Twitter.
Sure.
TikTok wasn't even a thing back then, which makes me feel really old. Yeah. So
Yeah, that came out during middle school for me. I was in like
God.
6th grade, I think.
yeah, that's crazy. That makes me feel so old. But,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. But yeah, so it was more debate focused. By my second semester, which was fall of 2018, with the debate club, so the debate club's second semester of existence, we started expanding outside of just our internal club, and we actually did, I was part of a team that flew to California, I think twice that semester for an actual like interstate debate, like much more formal and much more structured.
Kind of sounds like Regents.
Yeah, I think it was similar, that same area. So that was a lot of fun. So definitely, even in just my 2 semesters, it took off a lot from first semester to second semester. But it definitely seems like since then, you guys have done a really good job of being more public facing and more media driven and having much more of a social media element. Yeah,
well, and as far as numbers, like I know Ted talked to us of, he really likes that kind of 7, 8, 9, even 10 suite range, because then it feels like everyone's included, everyone has something to do. From your experience back when it was like 20, 30, were there some people that just, like you mentioned, not everyone would really show up? Were there people that just kind of stood there and didn't really do much?
Probably, especially because there's tons of faces I definitely don't remember from that inaugural class. So yeah, there were probably people who were maybe there for the participation grade. Yeah, but I mean, we still did a good job that first semester of kind of rotating through, like, okay, 1 week it would be these 2 people versus these 2 people, and then we would obviously rotate through each week and have, change the topic each week. So there was still there was a good level of engagement, and then it was stronger the next semester when the club shrunk to about half its size. It was closer to maybe like about 20 of us that second semester.
Makes sense. Cool. Anything else kind of regarding the internship as a whole?
Nothing comes to mind for me.
No, it just sounds really, really cool to hear what it was.
It's fascinating how
in
things
the
have
beginning.
changed. Yeah.
Yeah, no, which you guys deserve a lot of credit for that, for sure.
Thank you.
How much it's changed.
The one constant is Ted, I will say.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, awesome. Well, now that we have kind of that background information, Sean, you've written a lot about kind of the elections, the Democratic Party moving forward. So I want to spend some time, talking about 2026, talking about, maybe some strategies going forward. We've addressed this in part in previous episodes, but like sort of what would you kind of like to see? And I'll just open this up to a general discussion of, where do you see 2026 going as a whole, and like more importantly, what would you like to see that for change?
I think that what we saw this past Tuesday night with a series of off-year elections, it lays out a really useful blueprint for what we want to see in 2026. I think we we saw all the right patterns that we certainly want to pick up on and apply next year once we're hitting the midterms. I think what's important is that it's not a matter of, okay, let's look at this candidate in this race who was really far left, and he won by a lot, so let's policy-wise, we have to lean that way.
Sure.
And or like, oh, look at these candidates in these races where they won on a more centrist, moderate platform, so that must be the way to go. It's not about the policy so long as you're just talking about what people care about in the first place. Like the solutions come next. The first step is talking about the things people need solutions to. And what we learned on Tuesday, or certainly what we validated this past Tuesday night, was that those issues are affordability, economic opportunity, cost of living in general, inflation. I think there was a long time, Ted will tell you how much I used to rant about this, where I think the Democratic Party and the left in general really over-focused on social issues, the culture wars, they got sucked into it, and it just lost voters. And the fact that the current president, with his background and his history, was perceived as, oh, this is the guy who cares more about economics and more about our kitchen table issues than the other party, I think speaks a lot to how out of touch the Democrats were perceived.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of course correction that I'm really happy to have seen now this year, having learned the lessons from last year's general election, where I think the Democrats finally, I don't know why it took 2 elections or 3 elections to really learn this, going back all the way to 2016. But it seems like they finally started to learn their lesson about what Americans want to hear.
For sure.
And Americans want that acknowledgement of like, we're struggling, especially our generation. I mean, I'm sure you guys have read and talked a lot about just our economic outlook compared to our parents or compared to even 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And what you start with is confronting that and acknowledging that and addressing it. I think from there's not then a one-size-fits-all, like, okay, we have to lean really far left to solve that, or we have to stick with centrist, moderate policy to address that. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It depends on the city and the state. That's the whole point of federalism. Sure. There's different solutions depending on where you are. But I think what is universal is what Americans are struggling with right now, which is just the economic, just the everyday economic issues and cost of living, how hard it is for people our age to buy a house, stuff like that.
So it sounds
Tell me
like
about it.
So it sounds like there's a couple of dynamics there. For one, you have like what are our politicians actually talking about, and economic issues are obviously kind of the top issue right now, but also how they're talking about it. So like I like to surround myself on social media with like some conservative groups just to see kind of like what they're thinking, how they're perceiving news. And a lot of them took the recent elections and said like, we need to talk about affordability, otherwise we're going to lose in 2026. And I took that as more, you're talking about affordability just to win an election, and that like shouldn't be the mindset. It's like, yeah, obviously talking about economics is important, but it's also how you talk about it. So like you mentioned, actually talking to voters, hearing their concerns. I think that's like what our politicians on campaigns should be doing. But I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, I guess I kind of have a question for you, since you're a little more well-versed in the political field. Like, I agree, and I think you two would probably as well, that the culture war thing was a huge detriment to, the Democratic Party's receptiveness. And I'm just more curious as to how that came to be, do you think? Because even though, like, it's fundamentally important issues, like, a lot of the groups represented are almost overrepresented in the media. And so I'm curious, is it like not actual politicians, more so like popular media figures who popularized that, and the politicians kind of took that to be what people thought? Or was it really a grassroots thing that just grew so strong? Was it actual politicians? Like, where did that whole dynamic kind of come from?
Yeah, it's really a question, and it's something I've discussed with, really debated a lot with Ted at length. I think we disagree on the origins of that. From my perspective, I saw that as starting when I was in college, and I think this whole the culture of the kind of idea of the social justice warrior and the language policing and the political correctness and virtue signaling, all of that, from my perspective, started on like these liberal campuses and these like elitist like academic circles, and then was kind of a bottom up thing all the way up to the Democratic Party, who I think mistakenly saw that as, oh, like this is what our brand is going to be, and this is how I think, especially with after the 2016 election, there was definitely a reckoning of like, oh, there's still a lot of hatred and a lot of bigotry that is very real in our country, and that was true. That was absolutely true. But I think there was a course correction. There's an overcorrection where I think the Democrats made a very conscious strategic decision to really lean in on those issues as a response to what happened in 2016, and then also in a response to what happened in 2020 with Black Lives Matter and all that. I think where Ted and I do agree, I'll back up. So where Ted disagrees is he says that that's kind of been a pattern that's existed for a long time. Like the right, just as much as the left, has been guilty in many ways, especially in academic circles, but also beyond that, in terms of the language policing and the political correctness and censorship and things like that. So he traces the origins not to like liberal campuses in the late 2010s, post 2016, but to like far before that,
sure,
including just as much in conservative circles. I think where he and I do agree is that media for sure has inflated that and put like a giant microscope, a giant magnifying glass on top of those, especially on social media, who are the loudest voices, but generally a minority. I heard someone, like a talk show host once, put it this way: it's like the Democrats for too long mistakes Twitter users for real people, meaning, of course, just that like, it's just not a representative sample. But especially as you guys know, with the algorithms now, which are even way more advanced and way more effective than they were, when I was doing this in college, and it's gotten so sophisticated now that obviously it inflates the most incendiary, provocative rhetoric and messages and tweets and policy positions. So that's why we're seeing this polarization and why we're seeing these culture wars just inflated way beyond what actually reflects what everyday Americans actually care about.
Well, and not only that, but there are like just straight up accounts on Twitter that are just AI, saying essentially the same thing, which is always really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think social media has definitely played a really big part in kind of like the culture war. Cancel culture has become a thing on social media, and not taking a stance is taking a stance in itself to people on social media nowadays. And I know we talked a lot about that last episode, so I won't get too much into that. But no, I definitely think that social media has played a really big role in that, and then the Democratic Party has kind of observed that, and I don't know if they were observing it correctly.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also transformed a little bit, and maybe we can talk about how the party can sort of establish an equilibrium of like, I think you've seen in the last few years that the focus isn't so much on like trans issues, LGBTQ issues, or I guess immigration you could probably classify as a social issue. But I think what has divided the party more has been Israel-Palestine. So you have sort of the pro-Palestinians and then like the more pro-Israelians. Israelians? Yeah. And that kind of seemed to divide the party a lot in 2024. So that to me, that seems like sort of a continuation of a social issue, even though it's maybe, you probably can't classify it in the same category. So going back to sort of the original topic, like how can the party sort of establish some sort of equilibrium of like, okay, our platform is about affordability, economics, but we care about these social issues as well. I'm curious what you guys think.
For me, I think it kind of goes back to kind of what you'd mentioned earlier, to where like there's a minority of further left people who tend to have the loudest voices, right? And part of that voice often is like, we need to focus on Israel, Gaza, and terrible things are happening there. I think anybody can agree. But nonetheless, that gets very distracting from the likes of the kitchen table problems, right? The affordability, I can't even imagine owning a house in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's very applicable to me. And I understand that other people are suffering. But when the loudest voices are only talking about something so far removed, granted it's still important, but so far removed from like what we're experiencing, then it gets very distracting, I guess. Does that make sense?
Do you think that makes sense. Do you think it's a point of privilege? So like the people that make Israel-Palestine their like top issue, do you think that they're just at a point where that's something that they are able to care about because they do own a house, they are economically well off?
I don't think I'd go that far, because I think a lot of the supporters tend to be like my age in a very similar position to me. Like they also can't afford a house.
Mm-hmm.
They probably are also struggling here as well. I think it's kind of this like chicken and the egg problem of like, at least us three, maybe you as well, we're kind of growing up in this culture war. And once we got, smart enough to start understanding politics and culture, this is just how it was. Mm-hmm. And so it's only natural for people to get upset when something bad happens, especially if it's being reinforced on the likes of social media or by your political pundits. I don't think it's inherently privileged, although the fact that we're so far removed from it and it's so blatantly obvious that some of the things happening there are bad, it's natural that people get upset, mm-hmm. but nonetheless, I do think that to a degree, it's been distracting us from the likes of affordability, and the Democratic Party has been kind of dealing with that kind of louder voice, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to circle back really quick to Israel-Palestine, it's also not even like, well, that's like maybe a social issue and that's in the category of like, let's focus on this last and talk more about the economic mm-hmm. issues that hit Americans domestically. Israel-Palestine is something that a lot of people care about very deeply. So that is something that I think the Democratic Party should lean into, certainly more so than maybe some of the, who uses what bathrooms or pronoun bills or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like that is something that people genuinely are passionate about. What needs to happen though is that the Democrats need to understand like what is shifting, like what is like, yes, people are passionate about that issue. What side are they on? Like, how do most people, especially our age, how are people starting to feel, and where do they find themselves? Which side do they find themselves on that argument? Because I think it's time now for for a very long time, the Democratic and Republican establishments equally have been very pro-Israel. That's just how things have pretty much been since 1947. That's just what America does, period. That's one of our foreign policy pillars. That's starting to change at a grassroots level substantially, especially since October 7th. And I think Democrats need to, and I think some of the candidates that we're seeing have success on the left are the Democrats who are daring to deviate from Democratic doctrine on that issue, where it's like, no, it's time to acknowledge that like we need to not abandon Israel, but certainly re-examine what our stance on that is, especially considering how many Americans are starting to feel about that and see how they're starting to see that issue. So that's another thing too. It's like, listen to your voters, certainly on the economic issues, but if there's non-economic issues that voters still care about a lot, listen to that too and acknowledge that and confront that as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of the rhetoric that even comes out of the voters is really off-putting to maybe someone more in the middle. So like, I'll give an example. Actually, I'll give two examples. Let's circle back to a different topic. So like with Israel-Palestine, like whenever I hear someone say like, oh, Kamala Harris is like pro-genocide or something like that, like, wow, that's like insane. And it turns me off to the issue that you actually care about, which is a real issue. And at the same point, if we go back to the social justice issues, like this was a skit, but I know that it like actually happens. It was a skit where like this woman is at a Mexican food truck and she's like yelling at all these white people who are getting Mexican food, and they're like, "Oh, you're appropriating cultures," and like it's a skit, but it's so funny, and it just makes me wonder like, oh, how did we get to this point, and why do people care about this so much? Because I think the underlying issues have some degree of importance, but I can't help but feel like voters' minds are just broken with a lot of these issues, and it's just, for whatever reason, we've decided to prioritize these instead of like how much money do you have in your bank account? So yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe that speaks to a larger issue we're seeing too, in terms of how we're always seeing the pendulum swing back and forth between either extreme. It's like, yes, I think it's time for the Democrats to really reckon with their traditional stance on Israel, given where a lot of their voters are at now. But at the same time, we can't be leaning too far in the other direction, saying like, oh, well, now this politician either supports genocide in Israel, or the opposite extreme, where it's like, oh, they're just like a Hamas mouthpiece now because they're too anti-Israel, right? There's a ton of nuance, and just like with any issue, it's just not black and white. It's not like the Rebel Alliance versus the Empire. Like there's just, it's complicated, it's complex, and I think acknowledging the realities on both sides, as opposed to just like letting the algorithm win and letting us all be swung back and forth between either extreme is important. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it does have to do with media. Social media is just, we see people talking about issues that, maybe don't matter. And that actually, I do think this is where the point of privilege comes in, is like you might see some pundit or some, content creator who does politics say like, oh, Israel-Palestine is the number one issue in this country, when they like have a house, they make six figures. And like people are susceptible to that. And we talked about this with Ted last episode of, media just absolutely shapes the way people think about, political issues. So it's just, I guess, what do you guys see as the solution to that? I know I raised in our last episode, like straight up, just don't even go on social media. Don't watch the news, like media news. But I'm curious what you guys think. Like, how do we kind of get back, or like course correct ourselves of like, not falling into these traps of secondary and even tertiary issues?
Well, I think there's a core component of that we just have to address, and it's the control over the media, or the popular media at least, that the current administration just has, especially over its base. Now it's weakening, and meaningfully weakening, and we saw that with last Tuesday. But I still think it's true that the media spheres that they've entrenched are still very powerful, and regardless of however, people who may disagree with them, Democrats, us, whatever it may be, can kind of separate from that. The current administration supporters are still going to be entrenched in that world, at least until, maybe the midterms, maybe until the next presidential election, until they see, more failures of the administration. But I guess I'm curious to hear from you, like, what do you make of the whole, like, popularization of the, I'll say, MAGA media sphere? Like, how did that, why is it that the Democrats failed to capitalize on media as quickly as, say, MAGA Republicans?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I'm not sure why they've failed to do that. I think maybe to a degree, the Democrats still are guilty of maybe too much idealism in the sense like, oh, like, yeah, the algorithms are bad, social media is unhealthy, so let's stick with like a internet-based, cable-based campaign. It'd be nice to go back to like 20 years ago when, like, you know, take the Obama campaign. It was a grassroots level, like, you know, it was built on a grassroots level, door-to-door canvassing kind of structure. And yes, that's still important, but that's just not the reality anymore, where, like, you can't have a successful campaign without really tapping into just the media, the current media ecosystem and how that works. I mean, you know, take our friend in New York, who I think really was ultimately successful in his campaign because he was so savvy on TikTok. I mean, that TikTok, he built his campaign on TikTok the way Obama built his campaign on just grassroots canvassing and community organizing.
And I also think there's examples of people who don't have like any political power, but they're so well known, they're like celebritized because of their social media presence.
And have zero actual qualifications on speaking to politics in a lot
zero
of cases.
qualifications and zero, honestly, power other than they're just, you know, in some kind of office.
Yeah, I think media and social media has just become so integrated into our society. It's hard to separate all aspects of our society from the media. So I don't think there really is a way to separate social media from politics, and I think it would be a messy process to try to do so now. And I think all of the public figures and political figures have noticed that, and I think that they're trying to use social media as much as they can to their advantage with like marketing in a way. It's just like a new form of marketing your own ideology or your agenda.
Yeah.
And to your point, Peyton, I think the proper response to this MAGA media sphere is not like, oh, this is bad and toxic and unhealthy, which it is, but the response isn't like, well, let's not do that because that's bad. The response should be like, well, we absolutely need our own version of that. We need to, take like young men, for example. That's obviously a demographic I'm interested in paying attention to in the political environment. I think we saw the numbers swing very heavily from the Democrats to the Republicans in 2024, and I think in large part that was because of like how well MAGA tapped into that media sphere, like the podcasting world, just the short form video content, stuff like that. And I think like the Democratic candidate made a huge mistake not going on Joe Rogan, for example. And I think the response needs to be like, oh yeah, needs to not be like, this is bad, let's not do it, but more, what's our version of this? Like, if we don't have our like space within that larger media space, then everyone who is in that space is just going to go to the one that does exist, which right now is just kind of the MAGA red pill, like podcaster world.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
I just think something that I find really interesting and would like to know and like get to the bottom of is, why is that so popular? Like, why did people like tune into that so heavily, and like what on a psychological level or philosophical level made them do that?
They're young and impressionable. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, like kind of how we sort of compete against that, I'll use Pete Buttigieg as an example. Like, separate him from his policies and whatnot, but his willingness to like go on Fox News, go on these like right-wing basically strongholds and just, you know, talk. I think that sort of methodology is something that, you know, future candidates should embrace, because like that is what we need. And like you mentioned, not going on Joe Rogan, that was a huge mistake that we can say in retrospect. So yeah.
Well, kind of in that same vein, then, like looking forward to 2026, like what are some actual, to the extent you're allowed to talk about, you could be broad or whatever, but like strategies that like are like, people who are running for office are like, this is what I am going to do because I think it will be more helpful, like a direct kind of, like, what are the actual steps?
Are you talking about more from a policy standpoint or like a messaging and campaigning and rhetoric standpoint?
Both, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, I think I'll go back to what I was saying earlier. Like, from a messaging standpoint, I think really it's less about policy, especially because, I mean, quite frankly, most Americans they don't have the time to read. Like, no one read, like, you know, Hillary Clinton had just pages and hundreds of pages worth of like policy, which I think would have been good policy on her website. Like no one's going to read that. No one has fucking time for that. Even I don't. And I'm a huge policy nerd. So it's less about like do we want a center left solution or a far left solution to this economic problem? Like you have to, the point, the important thing is talking about those economic problems in the first place, acknowledging like people are hurting. Yeah, we have a great GDP. So what? No one cares. It's still impossible to buy a house if you don't make six figures.
Yeah.
And then in terms of more of the campaign, like if that should be your message in terms of how you go about spreading that message. I think it's very much just like accepting the reality of the technological ecosystem we live in now. It's playing the game that the Republicans are winning because that's the game now. That's just the reality. So going into these spaces like what Pete Buttigieg is doing, going on podcasts, starting a podcast, like learning how to use TikTok, learning how to reach people, meeting people where they're at, I think is the most important thing that the Democrats are doing. I think a lot of that was validated on Tuesday night.
Yeah. And I think we'll get to you guys as well, but I think an interesting case study is just the 2024 election of like, I think the Democratic Party was too busy trying to defend the Biden economy, whether or not it was good or not or bad, whatever. And you say like, oh, the GDP is good. You actually don't have economic problems. That was obviously a huge messaging mistake. Because like, sure, maybe the GDP was good, but like no one was actually receiving benefits from that. So I think that was a huge issue. And I think it stems from they were trying to, play political games of like, oh, the Biden economy was actually good. I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, no, just to your point really quick, I think, that was a huge mistake too by the Harris campaign in that, she was too afraid to distance herself from the administration. So she was too afraid to say like, oh, like the economy's bad right now. Like instead, I think she went more in the direction of like, oh yeah, look how great the economy has been under my administration with Joe Biden. And rather what she should have done was been like, yeah, like I get it. Like you guys are hurting. We haven't, like the Biden administration hasn't done an amazing job. Things aren't that much better since COVID. And I think just like kind of pretending that things were good just because she had to because she was tied to the current administration was a really big mistake.
It was a hard position for sure. But
I don't know. I'd just like to see more debating and having candidates interact with each other.
Not 70-year-olds?
Correct. Young people too. Young people in office is something that I would like to see more. I don't know if that's idealistic, but no, I think seeing candidates interact with each other in like a civil way, kind of like how we do on this podcast, would turn down the temperature a lot in the country, I think. And I also think it just would bring back more of like respect to politics in a way, and it less be more of an entertainment value and more of like, this is our country. Like we have a democratic say in
on a global
everything
stage too.
Yeah.
So like my biggest source of hope the last however many years has been like every so often I'll see clips of like the Nixon Kennedy debates or like the Obama McCain debates. I'm like, man, I wish I was like in that era of like at least political rhetoric.
So
Stop
civil.
Just like insulting each other every sentence. I don't know. I mean, obviously candidates don't like each other all the time. But
well, we even talked about this last week, and then Peyton, I'll get to you. Is like, the focus on from the left, like calling people fascists, whether or not that may be true, just separate that from the issue. No one really wants to hear that. Like that's not what people care about. Even if it is a valid issue, that's not what your lower class voter is concerned with.
it's just what gets clicks.
That's very true. But Peyton, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I'm thinking back about the debate thing, and the last Biden v. Trump debate was horrible for everyone involved. It was an embarrassment for the entirety of the country, in my opinion. But then I think to the Kamala Trump debate, and on one hand, it was still insults, but nonetheless, like I do think I'm an advocate for Kamala's policy there, or maybe not policy, but like going hard on Trump and like demonstrating to the world
her approach.
That her approach. Sorry, thank you. Demonstrating to the world just the kind of flaws that this guy may have, be it character flaws, and then his inability to respond with much substance was obvious to me. But I also don't know how obvious that is to the average American voter.
Well, and that can lead to an interesting question, and then I have a fun one later on. How can the Democratic Party, and obviously this is our personal opinions, like this is not UA Discourse as a whole saying this, how can the Democratic Party win over the swing voters, win over the centrists?
Do what they did on Tuesday.
Yeah. Bingo. I agree.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
I think another thing, and this is kind of going back to something you were saying.
Yeah.
So I'm less optimistic about one of your points, which was like, it would be great, of course, to see more debate, go back to what, how things worked in 2008,
Yeah.
Obama, McCain, when there was actual mutual respect and civilitude. I'm very pessimistic, and I just think that era is gone.
Yeah.
But what I will say is where I think something that is more realistic and could be really effective is your other point, which was about young voters. And I think a big something that really frustrates me is how the Democratic establishment, when you're thinking like the Chuck Schumers of the Democratic Party, how much they gatekeep. I mean, and in a literal, like real tangible way with like campaign finance and donations and endorsements, they really gatekeep. I mean, Chuck Schumer still, he never endorsed the New York mayor candidate. And I think that there's a lot of gatekeeping we see still in the establishment. Nancy Pelosi's done a lot of great things, but not gonna lie, I was happy to see that she's retiring.
I think everyone is.
Yeah, and it's time for like a new a new generation.
For sure.
And there are all these incredibly qualified candidates who, because they're closer to our age, or in many cases are literally our age, they're literally my age, but they understand these problems, but it's very hard for them in a logistical way to get very far when the Democratic establishment and the DNC and like the ones who actually control the purse in campaign finance are not giving them a leg up, and instead just like putting all their resources into just like the same like cookie cutter copy paste, like, oh, here's just like our safe, moderate, boring candidate.
Yeah, I think
who's
just
70 years old.
I think just our political parties need to start evolving with us and bringing in younger generations, and realizing that maybe the older eras are just gone because they're not doing well.
Well, and to that point, here's my fun question. So we've been talking about the left, the Democrats, et cetera. I'm curious, in 2026, what kind of policy platforms to compete against the Democrats would you like to see from Republicans, without saying, oh, just employ Democratic policy?
I can't imagine a non-Trump endorsed. Like, I'm so mind melted by the entrenchment of like MAGA that I can't imagine a world where, unless things change, like I know that his approval rating is at an all-time low right now, or disapproval rating is high. I can't imagine a world where it's not like MAGA either comfortably still doing what it does or scrambling to do what it does, I guess. So I don't know how else to answer that.
Maybe if you, not policy, what about like rhetoric or messaging?
A Republican willing to distance themselves from Trump and maybe return to, the Obama era Republicans before then. Like, I feel more comfortable with that, even though I still probably wouldn't agree with them entirely. It seemed a lot more approachable to me if the whole Trump era of Republicanism kind of dissipated, but I don't think that's ever going to happen, or at least not for a while.
Yeah, that was going to be my answer. Is just it would definitely have to start with like a never Trumper in the Republican Party. Like it just
Yeah, I don't know. I just think social issues are so hot with both parties right now. I kind of want to see those go away a little bit, not entirely, but again, bring back more of a focus to things that are like affecting Americans from a financial standpoint and like their future is just the way they're able to live. So I don't know.
I think.
Oh, go ahead.
I think to sort of answer your question, I think in a world where there was a moderate Republican who made it very clear that they didn't endorse Trump, not that that really exists as far as I know, but let's say that happened, and they again spoke to the real issues that I care about and that 99% of Americans care about, and they distanced themselves from the culture wars. I would vote for that person over a Democrat who just was like a social justice warrior straight off of like an academic campus who had like never actually talked to a real American or seemed that way, right? It's not about party, and it's not even really about policy solutions to me. It's just about like, do you know what we care about in the first place? I think one of the first posts that I wrote for my blog was about Mamdani, where it was like, I think I titled it, I think I just became a progressive. And that's because for the longest time, I very much consciously, and Ted will tell you again how much I used to rant about this, like I distanced myself very much from the progressive wing of the party because like they only talked about, like, it's not that I was against ambitious far left economic policies, it's that they didn't talk about that in the first place. They talked about the woke stuff, the culture war stuff.
Yeah.
Whichever party and whichever wing of either party is not talking about that and talking about the things that we all actually care about is going to be the one that has my attention. I think that's very true too of independent and swing voters.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the social stuff is important and I care about it, but I also care about where I'm going to live. And I care about if I'm going to be able to have food, you know? So like it's hard, but I think that we need to start talking about like real issues and things that are affecting people.
I think it's hard because we've been in this culture wars for so long that we've essentially forgotten what like quote unquote real policy discussions looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want debates to be boring again. I've also
Yes.
gone back.
Yes.
I've gone back and watched. I'm not saying this. I ever think this is going to happen. That's not what sells anymore, and it's
Right.
the reason it doesn't exist anymore in the first place. But I've also gone back and watched like McCain-Obama debates, and it's so boring because they're just talking about the housing crisis and like tax foreclosure and like bailing out the auto industry, and it's like it's just so civil and so boring, and I miss that, and I don't think we're going to go back to that. But
Not even just debates. I want life to be boring again.
yeah,
like
Yeah.
we, as a generation, we've been living through crisis after crisis after controversy after controversy. Like, man, I feel like we've aged 50 years in like one generation.
I'm
Just
ready
wanna be
for
able to
some.
breathe.
I'm ready for some precedented times.
Yes.
Well, okay, maybe just as like a final kind of concluding question.
Yeah,
maybe
go for it.
Wrap everything out. So we've talked quite a bit about, what the future of the Democratic Party could be, kind of strategies they could implement. But what about us as individual people, right? Because there's only so much we can do besides voting. But is there anything else?
I mean, be an activist. If you support someone, like, don't just vote for them. See what you can do for their campaign. See what you can do to volunteer, canvas. I know that, like, anyone who is remotely interested in politics should do some kind of canvas work. I did like a day of door knocking, and it's kind of scary, low key, but it was a cool experience. So I think, as you say, more than just voting, like, actually go out there and do something.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say stay informed and try not to fall for sensationalism on the media, because that can rope you into a lot of things that aren't really as important or shouldn't be.
Yeah, for sure.
My answer would be also pay attention to local politics, especially at the city level, at the county level. I was guilty of this where for basically up until I started my new job like 5 months ago, like I never really paid attention to local politics. I think that was partly a product of being from the DC area where just everything federal government is just in your face all the time.
Yep.
And so often when we have these conversations, even about Tuesday night, it's still, we're talking about like the big high profile state races. We're talking about the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and the general election 2028, the 2026 midterms. I think there's still not enough discussion and awareness of like just what's happening at the city level. And having now worked in city government, I realize how important that is, and I have a lot of respect for the constituents who come in whenever we have our council or our council meetings, and they, even when I disagree with them, even when I think they may be misinformed, they're clearly passionate about what's happening in their backyard, and those people have way more influence on what's happening than most people who are, and I'm not discouraging participation in national level politics, but obviously if you engage at the local level, you're going to have more of a say. You're going to have a bigger seat at a smaller table, and that's just as important for just all the problems we're seeing in our country. I mean, it's not just like, okay, we can't just rely on like housing and urban development to fix the housing crisis. Like there are tons of city programs that address that in every city, and you can have a say in that. You can vote for your council member. You can come in and speak at a local city council meeting like I see every 2 weeks at my job, and you can just talk about those problems, and you're going to have a much bigger spotlight doing that than trying to just send a letter to Congress, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I think, really important too.
No, I totally agree with that. I will admit that when
Absolutely.
I received my ballot, I did not know who some of the people in my local county were, but of course I knew the big names on the tickets. But I think even just like knowing who you're voting for and not just voting to vote, I think is also a good thing too. I mean, everyone should vote, but be informed.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
I agree.
Cool. Can I plug my blog really quick?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Be a narcissist. So it's Patriots Against Trump on Substack. If you think you should Google that, it'll come up. It's also under Sean Capps, CAPS, my internet alter ego. So,
Oh, yes.
We'll put it in our description.
Yes, we will.
that'd be great. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this has been a great episode. Thank you, Sean,
Yes,
for
thank you so
deciding to
much.
be
I had a
guest
great
with us.
time. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Vote. Be
Go
informed. Do all the things and, all that fun stuff.
Learn who your council member is.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks for watching, everyone. This has been a great episode. I've been Logan.
Peyton.
Abby.
I've been Sean.
And thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.